Okay, so good morning. So most of my work on interactions between the gut and the rest of the body has focused on older mechanisms than the microbiome, because I work on the 19th century. So I've mostly been looking at nerve-based connections between the gut and the brain, for example. And there was a persistent emphasis on the relationship between the digestive system and the mind in many aspects of 19th century medicine and science. But the idea that bacteria might be involved in the interaction between brain and gut has been around for longer than people might think. So that's what I'm going to look at briefly today. So the realization that bacteria reside within the human gut first emerged in the 1840s, especially through the work of this person, John Goodsir. And there was further confirmation of the presence of bacteria in the human stomach and intestines and feces in the second half of the century from British and German and US scientists. Research undertaken by German and French physicians on infants in the later decades of the 19th century showed the importance of gut bacteria for physical health. Notably the physiology and pathophysiology of digestion. And I've put some examples here of the work of Theodore Escher and Henri Tissier. So that's some work on the idea that gut bacteria is actually beneficial to the human host in terms of physical health. A new theory of disease involving bacteria in the human gut also emerged in the later decades of the 19th century, and this was called autointoxication. Following Pasteur's discoveries in the 1860s, bacteriologists came to realize that intestinal flora, as microbes of the digestive system were then known, broke down protein residues into compounds that were shown to be very toxic. So this led to the reasoning that tomeins generated in the bowel could be absorbed into the bloodstream. And so the theory of intestinal autointoxication, or sort of self-poisoning from one's own waste, was born in the late 1880s, and notably through the work of French physician Charles Bouchard. And autointoxication as a mechanism for disease was applied to mental health, especially in France, which had a very long tradition of linking the digestive system with psychiatric illness. So physicians in the 1880s in France noted that their psychiatric patients' condition improved after they had received treatment for gastric symptoms. And some hypothesized that the bacteria in these patients' intestines might be intervening in their mental balance. And then more work in the 1890s highlighted relations between mental disorders and toxins in the digestive system. So researchers in France at the end of the 19th century were applying ideas about the role of gut bacteria in health and disease to rethink disorders of the mind. And this was taken up in other Western countries as well. And I also, my focus is on Western nations. In terms of treatment for autointoxication, so a range of possibilities were suggested, but some scientists suggested that the toxins in the gut could be combated through the introduction of certain forms of bacteria into the alimentary tract. Immunologist Elie Metchnikoff, who was based at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, was a really key figure who explored the use of bacteriotherapy or bacteriotherapy. So this is the use of beneficial bacteria in human health. He was very obsessed with aging and longevity and living a long life. And he noticed that Bulgarians who lived for long periods seemed to consumed high amounts of fermented dairy products. And he theorized that the lactic acid in these might be addressing the dangers of putrefactive intestinal bacteria, as it's referred to. And I put up some examples here of his work. So these were best-selling books. So this led to the widespread dissemination of this idea that people could live much longer, could live well for longer by introducing beneficial bacteria into the gut. So what about the dissemination of this research? Bouchat's theory of auto-intoxication had remarkably wide currency, not just in France, but especially in the US and in Germany as well. So non-expert readers were introduced to this theory of auto-intoxication through things like newspaper articles and adverts, and also books. So American health reformer John Harvey Kellogg popularized the theory through this text, which also sold in very high numbers. And he gave talks as well. So he doesn't just talk about the disease in this book, but he talks about how to reform the gut flora, which you could do in many ways, including the introduction of what he refers to as protective bacteria through the consumption of things like buttermilk and yogurt. And he talks about this in the book as being beneficial both for body and mind. And I found this example from the UK. I don't know if you can see this.
You can click X on that.
This bit
Yeah.
here. Oh, sorry, I hadn't realised that was blocking review titles. Yeah, so this L.M. Douglas, who's a pig breeder and dairy farmer in Edinburgh, published this text about using fermented milks to prolong human existence. And it mentions that people who live long by drinking soured milk don't show the same tendency to mental decay, which is so prominent and sad a feature amongst Western patients. So those are some of the publications. There was also a proliferation of products containing beneficial bacteria. The first ones were based on Mechnikov's Bacillus bulgaricus, such as, there we go, intestine firming tablets. And they were produced by Berlin Labs of New York, and they claimed to do many things, but including increasing mental vitality. That was one of the main things that I highlighted. So in this advert on the left, they state that the active principles contained in the famous Bulgarian sour milk ferments are of exceptional value to the health of humankind. And then on the right-hand side, we've got this typical Bulgarian peasant in the picture. It says that the use of these tablets as a pleasing part of the daily diet promotes physical and mental health. And then other American companies got hold of the idea and sold fermented milk in the form of dried powder, even in some sort of chocolates, and also in the form of pills. And I've looked at some examples in France. There are numerous references in newspapers and magazines to products that contain beneficial bacteria. One was called Lactosine B, and then this is another one, Sinuberaz, which was advertised in weekly French papers that had quite high circulation numbers. Often with an illustration, as you see on the right, of different strains of what we call protective bacteria. It's claimed that taking this product every day will populate the intestines with a garrison of good active microbes, energetic and vigilant police officers. It's from 1918. And the main focus on these ones is on longevity. And then there's another one here that highlights even further this idea of the microbes acting as a sort of police force in the image here. So these are from the 1910s. Then Lactus acidophilus became very popular in the 1920s, and lots of products focused on this, specifically as a way of improving mental health. They were quite aggressively advertised in medical, but also in popular media. So I found this example. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's a form of milk, acidophilus milk. And as you can see here, many of the adverts seem to target women, including in magazines like in Marie Claire. And in addition to changes in regimen, by typical lactic acid ferments, they refer to, were advertised as an effective solution to auto-intoxication. And this could be administered here through this sort of milk product, or through yogurt made with Yalacta. There are lots of adverts for this product, which enable the owner, according to the ad, to conveniently prepare yogurt at home. So it's advertised in a range of publications. I found one from Marie Claire in 1937 that said that you could use it to create exquisite cocktails. So it's quite sort of fashionable. And then it continued to be advertised in the 40s, these, as you can see, are from the 1950s, and they still refer to the ferments, the etymologies, yes. So what happened to all this? Eventually, there was problems with the theory of water intoxication, which we might talk about later, but it was effectively discredited. There was also a tightening of regulations when it came to health claims on food products. A possible other reason for the demise of this early form of bacterial therapy is that it undermines doctors' authority. It placed a certain amount of power in the hands of the consumer. But to sort of sum up, oh sorry, there was another one here that I forgot to show you, also from the 1950s. You can sometimes get these products online on eBay. So to sum up, we know that there was a keen interest in gut-brain relations within medical and popular culture in the 19th century. So there was a sort of basis from which to go. In scientific research, there was an awareness of bacteria in the gut from the second half of the 19th century onwards, and the role of gut bacteria in mental health was being researched in the late decades of the 19th century and early 20th century. We also know that the use of bacteria as a form of treatment was widely researched in the early 20th century. And that has been noted by some scholars, but much less attention has been paid to popular interest in microbes in the gut. And it's clear that people were buying a wide range of these elective products to address harmful bacteria in the early decades of the 20th century. So I think more work is needed to explore this area. In particular, specialists in literary and cultural history could contribute towards understandings of the communication of ideas to do with gut bacteria and their role in human, especially mental health, beyond the academy. So that's the end of my presentation, and I think Esther is going to talk about this topic in present. Voila.
Thanks, Madam, for handing over, and thanks and for the introduction to the space, and thanks, Mary, for having me today. So I'll indeed take this forward and present some recent some quite exploratory empirical work, trying to understand how people view the microbiome and relationship with other beings in the present day. So I conducted an empirical study looking at these questions in order to answer to what degree people are aware these days of interactions between the human gut, mind, and environment, and whether this awareness is associated with health behavior. So if you are aware that you are interdependent with microbes doing services for you within your body and outside of your body, does it affect how you view the world and how you interact with the world, and how you treat your own body? And also, is there maybe evidence for a more general sense of or view of interconnectedness, in the sense that if you understand that you are dependent on microbes for digestion of your food, for example, and for producing foods, does that reflect also different views of how you view nature and how you view relations between different groups of people? So this work was really inspired by starting to talk with Manon about these kinds of issues in present day kind of research on gut and mind interactions, my interest on food and eating behavior, and my increasing interest in how we can stop the climate emergency. Clearly, we are not acting in any way that reflects an awareness of how we are dependent on the living environment, because every day we go about to destroy it. And I think we need to catalyze our efforts to see how we can get people to understand that if we kill things around us, we'll eventually kill ourselves. And there's a sense of urgency around that. And this is one of my attempts to understand a little bit better what's going on in this. So I'll present to you the quantitative findings. We still haven't fully analyzed the qualitative findings from the mixed methods for sectional study among 84 UK residents. This was a representative sample in terms of age, gender, and education levels, with a mean age of about 46 years. And data were collected last year, so still during the pandemic, in fact, in an online study. So we asked people, have you come across the following terms before? And then we presented a long list of microbiome related terms, and we simply asked them, yes or no, have you come across this term before? And this was our measure of microbiome kind of awareness, very broad, really exploratory, but just to see whether people had any sense. And then we correlated this with a number of other measures. So we asked people, we constructed a novel scale to find out to what degree people integrated kind of gut-friendly behaviors in their daily lives. For example, consuming a variety of fresh foods, fresh fruit, veg, for example, fermented foods, these kinds of things. We measured to what degree they had the sense that that there's a connection between their gut and their minds in terms of their mental health, and to what degree they feel prepared to act on this. We measured with an existing scale people's commitment to the environment. For example, with an item like, it seems to me that humans and the environment are interdependent. We measured people's ecological dominance orientation with the image that you can see here. People are simply asked to indicate where on this scale, oh, and this is not well represented, so that this image should be really sitting above the 7. So where on that scale they best see themselves in terms of how they understand the relationships between humans and the rest of the environment and other beings. So from less hierarchical, where basically all kinds of organisms are in an equal kind of space, to more hierarchical, where humans kind of and larger animals dominate over plants and other kinds of organisms. We also measured with this existing scale human dominance over nature, so the sense of almost exploitation, that humans are entitled to use nature and to take from nature and use it until it's finished, or when, I asked myself, but okay, but we take, we don't give back, we don't allow it to regenerate, but we just take what we need and then get on with our lives until things are finished, apparently. And social dominance orientation, where which is also an existing scale from social psychology, which is really originally my background, with items such as we should not push for group equality. So really that sense that some groups are simply designed to dominate over other groups, right? And in a way, that's also kind of what we still live with the remnants of colonialism, and that way that we have organized economic systems at the moment where we dominate, where we benefit, right, from cheap labor from the global south, and take resources from other areas of the world, which we then call sacrifice zones, where people's lives apparently are less valuable than the lives of people in the, especially wealthy people in high income nations in the global north. So this sense of that, the social dominance is natural, and it's something that we just have to accept.
So is this student enterprise?
Okay, so these were the scales that we used. And in terms of findings, so the awareness of the different microbiome terms is displayed here. So this is simply the percentage of people who said yes to each of the terms. So almost everybody had heard of microbes and microorganisms, and also of prebiotics and probiotics. And so there is really probably good evidence that marketing works. If people had heard of prebiotics, because I don't think they learned about that in school, probably they learned about that from food packaging, where the capitalist economy, makes those terms widely known, probably as a simple fix to some health problems. But then really there's a dramatic decrease in terms of all the different types of microbiomes. They are much less known. The term microbiome in general still has maybe about 50% awareness, but then specific microbiomes in the gut may be still related to probiotics. But then that there's a microbiome in the skin, the soil, the general in human, oral, vaginal, and animal microbiomes, that is an environmental and especially lung microbiome that is much less well known. Also, the idea of the gut-brain axis, I guess that's a pretty scientific term. People weren't really aware of that, and people really weren't aware of things like the holobiome, this assembly of microbiome post interactions. So not much awareness actually. So in terms of even just the gut microbiome or plant microbiome, soil microbiome, the idea that there's living beings in the soil that make plants function and grow plants that can then nourish us, all this kind of interdependence there that we rely on for growing food and living on this planet, it does not seem to be widely spread in terms of awareness. In terms of key findings, so we looked mostly at correlations between these different constructs. I'm going to walk you through this from the first starting on the left and then going to the right. So we found a positive correlation between microbiome awareness and gut-friendly behavior. So people who were more aware of, a larger number of these microbiome terms were more likely to display gut-friendly behaviors in terms of eating lots of fruits, fresh fruit and veg, and also fermented products and these kinds of things. And they also felt more aware that their gut and their mind health are interdependent and were more prepared to act on this, to take their gut health into account when they wanted to have a healthy state of mind, for example, and feel good. And we also find that the number of microbiome related terms that people were aware of predicted human dominance over nature negatively, such that if people who had higher awareness of microbiome related terms were less inclined to embrace a sense of humans should dominate over nature. So they had a more kind of equal and less hierarchical view of human nature relationships, and also ecological dominance orientation. So the sense that we exploit and that we take from nature was less pronounced among people who were more aware of it. So this kind of does seem to reflect a general sense of interconnectedness. People who were more aware of interconnectedness within their own bodies also had a stronger sense of interconnectedness with other beings around themselves. The commitment to the gut-mind axis also positively predicted this commitment to the environment, in the sense of we have to protect the environment, and we have to make sure that things around us can live well if we want. And there wasn't a direct link between microbiome awareness and social dominance orientation, but there was an indirect link in the sense that the human dominance over nature positively predicted the social dominance. So this idea that humans dominate nature is positively correlated with the idea that some humans dominate other humans, and that's just how it is. So this idea of exploitation instead of regeneration and equal kind of interdependent relationships seems to be present across domains, so in human nature domain, in the domain of among humans. So to sum up, we found that microbiome awareness was related to health behaviors and to environmental attitudes, reflecting this general sense of interconnectedness. And we also saw these indirect links with social dominance orientation. Quite interestingly, and I think that's something we should replicate, although we found a really quite a significant correlation there, we saw that the microbiome awareness score was also correlated with politically liberal views. So we also asked participants to what degree they saw themselves as politically liberal or conservative on a scale. And those participants who showed an awareness of a larger number of microbiome related terms had more politically liberal views. And we were quite struck by that, because you could say that it's just almost a scientific awareness of these things exists, right? There is something like the soil microbiome, there is something like the lung microbiome, there is microbes, and there is pre and probiotics. That's not a political thing in itself, but apparently that awareness is more pronounced among people who who hold less conservative worldviews. And so I think that's something to be looked into further, also because of these indirect links with the kind of social dominance orientation, where kind of socially conservative worldviews are also more aligned with the idea that some groups get to dominate others. So I think that's an interesting space, especially in terms of protecting the climate and in terms of, questioning the privilege of some people to live at the cost of others. Clearly, interconnectedness and interdependence are essential to Earth systems that life depends on. So I think it's really crucial that we develop a good idea of a system and not simply of linear relationships. And I'd be also really interested to hear from them how that is represented in past writings and whether there's evidence of an awareness of systems. It seems as if, despite reflecting an awareness of the human health depending on other organisms, that in some of the communications, those organisms are still seen as a simple fix for a health problem in terms of linear relationships. You take a pill and then it has a simple direct effect through the microbes on your health, rather than systems thinking where there's complex systems with multiple components with emergent properties that can develop in non-linear ways. And I think understanding that would help us prepare better for the challenges that we're dealing with at the moment in terms of climate change and biodiversity collapse. It's possible that microbiome awareness, so our sense that we are interdependent with other organisms, can be a stepping stone for understanding interconnectedness more generally within wider planetary health systems and support environmental behaviors. And I'm really interested to understand better how we can increase people's awareness of interconnectedness in constructive and non-polarizing ways, so to prevent that this gets into a political space, but simply increase our understanding that we're interdependent with other beings in ways that we should foster if we want to keep surviving on this beautiful place. Thank you.